sure you keep up with all the new content on Gaming for XP. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, and we'll let you know once we've uploaded anything that's new. See ya! Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to a documentary by NoClips on how Fallout 76 was made, and I think you'll enjoy this one. It gives you a heap more detail about the game, lots of little nuggets of information, and I thought I would throw this up on the channel and share it with you guys. Enjoy, and we'll catch you later on Gaming for XP. See ya!
Hello friends, and welcome to the woods of West Virginia. Perhaps not the most traditional location for a Fallout game, but then 76 isn't exactly a traditional Fallout game, now is it? Is it Larry? So lonely. We've been making game design documentaries for a while now, but this was the first time we had the experience of being embedded in a studio before a game had even been announced. If you've watched our doc on the history of Bethesda Game Studios, you know that this part of the design window, the final 9 months or so, is when the entire team is playing the game, tinkering with mechanics, and putting in those final details. By this stage, nobody on the team had ever said the words Fallout 76 in front of camera. Our time in the studio began around 6 weeks before the reveal of the game at E3, so a lot of what you're about to watch was recorded while fundamental decisions about the game were still being made. So we came prepared and had 3 fundamental questions that we wanted to have answered by the time we left the studio. Number 1, we wanted to know the story behind its development. Number 2, we wanted to explore the world of West Virginia. And number 3, we wanted to dive as deep into the gameplay as we possibly could and find out what exactly you'll be doing while playing Fallout 76. Oh, and we really wanted to know what was going on with Starfield and the Elder Scrolls 6, but we'll probably wait until the end before we drop those questions on Todd. So, first things first, where did the idea for this multiplayer Fallout even come from, and how did the team at Bethesda Game Studios land on West Virginia?
Since debuting Vault 76 last year, in honor of America's tercentenary, Vault-Tec continues to expand with plans for well over 100 vaults around the country.
In our previous documentary, we covered the development of Fallout 4, but what we didn't mention then was that during this period, the team was also designing 76.
76 is the multiplayer design from Fallout 4.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
No one said that?
No.
It is. Hey, should we do multiplayer? Probably not. What would it be? Okay, it would be this. Let's talk it through. That's pretty awesome. And then you kind of, you put it away. So, all right, let's do our thing. And then every once in a while you keep talking about like, hey, we should have done that, or we should do it. And then, as Fallout 4 is going on, it becomes no, we should really do it, like, as its own thing.
As far back as 2013, the team was conceptualizing what a Fallout multiplayer mode might look like, but the idea was too big at the time, and so it was put to one side so the studio could focus on the single-player game. At this stage, the team at Bethesda Game Studios in Maryland was over 100 people strong, but they didn't have much experience in making online games, neither in terms of their design or in terms of their technology. But it was around this time that parent company ZeniMax opened a new studio in Austin, Texas, a studio that might just be able to help them out.
ZeniMax had opened Battlecry Studios, which was made up of a lot of MMO experts in the Austin area. People who, Chris and Doug go way back to Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies and Star Wars Republic, this amazing staff of people, and they were building a really cool game. But the lead programmer on 76, Jason, had been the client lead on Star Wars. He knew them all. Right. And we were talking about it, and he's like, hey, those are the guys to do it. And I'll admit, I was like, hey, we could hire. I'd gotten approval to hire, server back-end people and all of that, but I've been through that. And hey, if you have a team that works really well together, that is interested in working with you on it, hey, let's try to do that. So they started it before we shipped Fallout 4.
A month before Fallout 4 was released, Battlecry Studios went through a significant round of layoffs, as their free-to-play action title Battlecry was indefinitely put on hold. During all of this, the team in Maryland was transitioning onto Fallout 4 DLC and spinning up Starfield. So BGS asked the folks in Austin if they'd take a swing at retrofitting multiplayer capabilities into the Fallout 4 engine. Using tech from another sister studio in Richardson, Texas, Battlecry started trying to implement the Quake netcode into the Fallout engine. A massive undertaking that posed significant challenges, even for some of the most experienced network engineers in the business.
This engine has been around since Morrowind, at least. Some of the cool things, like when you dig through the code, is like you get to see, oh my God, this was used back in this game that I used to play like when I was barely out of college, right? Like nothing was developed with multiple players in mind. So all over the code, there's, what is the player doing, right? I want you to give a quest to the player, or well, it's like, well, that has to go. I guess the one way to look at it is the entire engine was based around a world with a player. Now that has to sort of change to, you need to base it around the player who could be in any world. So just that statement alone implies many, many, many changes. It's like the game doesn't load except around one player.
There's this thing we refer to as Atlas. And Atlas is, because there was one guy in the game, we called him Atlas because he held up the world. Because the world that you have only had to be accessed by one player, so they were tightly intertwined. So what we had to do is essentially decouple Atlas from the world so there could be multiple people.
Wherever Atlas went, that's where it was loaded. So for many months, it's like you couldn't go away from Atlas as another player. It's like if you did, you would crash because you're outside the realm of what was actually loaded. So a big effort was just changing that aspect as well. But then it sort of spreads out. So all of the quests that you get in like a Skyrim or a Fallout, they're all based around the quest itself, because the quest is its own entity. You need to re-architect that, because multiple people could all be on the same quest and they could all be in different stages. So really the quest data needs to live on the character, no longer on the quest itself. So that was very challenging as well, not only just in retooling the way the scripting stuff works, just getting the design team to start thinking about it from that perspective.
The first thing is it's a mindset change. You have folks who have been making single player quests here for so long, and what does it mean to be able to support more than one player? So there's a lot of things that go into that. Oh, how many people read a note at once, or who gets this bit of the story, and those are things we've never had to think about before. It's just stored on the client or the server, like those crazy, like those, what does that mean? Like things that, there are reasons why we never got into multiplayer before.
Battlecry had figured out how to modify the engine to work with multiplayer, even if quite how many people the world could support remained to be seen. Meanwhile, back in Maryland, a small group of leads were tasked with brainstorming this multiplayer Fallout project. They realized that just sticking multiplayer into an old Fallout map wouldn't cut it. To retain the same sense of scale with multiple people, the world would need to be big, really big. Plus, by this stage, they'd been building cities for 2 Fallout games. What if they did something more rural, less desolate? The team had looked locally for the location of Fallout 3, and so they did the same here. Except this time, instead of looking south, they glanced west, towards the vast wilderness of West Virginia.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Actually, every game starts with a map. Fallout 76, we decided, it's going to be set in West Virginia, and the first thing we did is we made the map. I believe it's always been 4 times the size of Fallout 4. It was pretty big. Todd sits with designers and to figure out, what story points we're gonna have.
There was just the small handful of us leads, deciding what to do, starting to lay out the map of the world, and figuring out how to take an entire state and shrink it down. Because before we did, a city and then the area around it, but we decided to do all of West Virginia.
I think we picked West Virginia because it was still East Coast, and it was a place that isn't really touched. If there ever were a nuclear war, none of us would be here. DC's done. We're first. So I'm perfectly content to know that I will not have to deal with any of that stuff. But West Virginia, like, no one's going to nuke West Virginia. So we were thinking that we would be able to do more of like we would be able to do trees, we'd be able to do an interesting visual look. The leads went out to West Virginia at the start of the project to look for landmarks and places to go.
So we find out what are like our landmarks that we want. Like, we know we want Morgantown and the Summersville Lake and stuff, and we take the real map and just start to like redraw it and remix it a little bit to find out how we want things to flow. Because West Virginia also isn't a square, but we kind of had to like it's like Harper's Ferry is so cool, but it's way out here, poking over Maryland. Like, let's just kind of shove it back in.
The state of West Virginia didn't only provide the team with a massive landmass to play with, but as it happens, the lore of West Virginia was full of myth and conspiracies that fit perfectly into the Fallout universe. West Virginian myths are among the creepiest in American folklore. Isolated villages trapped in vast, unforgiving wilderness has fueled terrifying stories of creatures that prey on unfortunate souls. There's the Grafton Monster, a giant pale-skinned headless horror that prowls the woods outside of Grafton. There's the Flatwood Monster with its terrifying cowl and beady eyes. The Snallygaster, a dragon-like demon that haunts an area outside of neighboring DC. And of course, the Mothman, a winged beast with piercing red eyes that prey on those in the Point Pleasant area. Like wandering the real woods of West Virginia, the world of Fallout 76 is full of monsters to hunt or be hunted by. There are far more creatures in 76 too, more varied types of enlarged insects, and everything from two-headed possums to giant sloths, and even intelligent plants.
Yeah, the Mothman's incredible because it's a different thing. We've never done it before. We're hoping to do stages to him, early on in the game. Maybe he's just stalking you. You just see these creepy little eyes like in the dark.
Because it's closer to when the bomb's actually detonated, so there's more radiation, so you can get crazier mutants and giant plants because it's more radiated at that time. It's half-life, it's going to decrease over time.
Right.
So that's our justification. Like, well, I haven't seen that in future Fallouts. It's like, maybe that was like such a bad mutation that they died out, but here, like, it still exists and it's like in full swing.
While the team had been adding plenty more new creatures to battle, they hummed and hawed over the inclusion of other AI humans. They wanted to make sure the feeling of running into other humans was special, and if the world was full of raiders, then instead of hearing distant gunfire and knowing it was another player, they'd spend large parts of the game trying to discern if somebody was human or an AI. On top of that, the lore of the game couldn't really support the idea of raiders. Fallout 76 takes place 25 years after the bombs were dropped. Vault 76 is one of a number of control vaults, meaning that instead of doing weird experiments on those inside, this vault was genuinely used to house people for a generation before leaving them out to rebuild society again. So this world has yet to be reclaimed by one faction or another, and so the decision was made to leave West Virginia bereft of other humans. But this caused a problem. Gun combat with AI is a central pillar of the Fallout experience. So they leaned into the lore and created a new faction of intelligent ghouls called the Scorched.
Where they're kind of like feral ghouls that are not quite so far gone. They still know how to use guns. So that's essentially our raiders, are the Scorched. But yeah, then most of the other things are just all the creatures and things like that. And I think it's like 63 things that we have now, because we had all the ones that we had before updated and fixed those, and then add all these new ones too.
The map of 76 is large, but it's been divided into a half dozen areas with their own flavour and difficulty. While you may emerge into the relative beauty of a green forest, there are much less forgiving areas of the map for you to explore. A hollowed out mountaintop, soggy floodlands, festering toxic wastelands, swampy woods, and a colossal mountain range that bisects the entire map. The new dynamic weather system can also have an impact on the player, with distant rad storms warding off expedition parties. There's a lot of space between things in this map, meaning coming across new locations should feel like uncovering something that's been hidden forever. Quiet cabins, abandoned wood mills, tall treetop watchtowers, flooded mines, and abandoned barbecue joints. All of these littering a landscape alongside cities and towns of all sizes, nuclear missile silos, and even a crashed space station. The world of 76 is larger and more detailed than their previous games, and featuring a bunch of new technology that the team may just be testing out for future games. They have a new system to propagate woods, a vastly improved dynamic lighting model, subsurface scattering, and far more complex animations for creatures who are going to be attacked by multiple players for the very first time.
So we do get sort of like the typical Fallout areas in certain spots. Like when you first start at the game, it's kind of nice and welcoming, but then you get to the crappier, dangerous parts and get the more traditional feel. Because this area it was like factories and things like that, and our justification for why it's all caked in white powder is that those factories were like full of chemicals and everything spilled out. With all the hills and the topography of the area, it's really beneficial for that, because Fallout 4 was actually like a really flat game, so it's hard to get those landmarks. Thankfully there's like skyscrapers and Diamond City, that giant glow, but in this case we have like an entire mountain range that bisects the map. So we can take that and put all these different landmarks on that. Like we made this ski resort called the Top of the World, which basically looks like a giant red UFO, and that's like a thumbtack in the middle of the map that you can orient yourself around. And then we have the giant bucket wheel excavator on another side. But it's also designed in that way where you're supposed to sort of lose where you're at once you go down in those hills. So you're deep in the valley, you're like, where am I at? And so you're encouraged to actually then go up the hill, and then we put all these like watchtowers and stuff, so then you're like, that's where I am, and pull out the binoculars and look around.
Fallout 76 features a number of different biomes inspired by real-world locations. The team is attempting to replicate that feeling of stumbling upon new areas from their previous games, and just like their other maps, West Virginia has become a template for storytelling. The state's cranberry bogs with their carnivorous plants seem like the perfect spot to introduce some wild mutations. So too does the mountaintop removal mining region of the state, which evokes the post-apocalyptic feeling all on its own. But West Virginia also taps into the Cold War conspiracies evoked in the Fallout games. West Virginia is the location of the United States Radio Quiet Zone, a 13,000 square mile region used for research and military intelligence. And West Virginia is also the home to the original location of the presidential nuclear bunker, located underneath the Greenbrier Hotel. Riffing off of all these real-world locations is something the team has enjoyed. They have a hotel too, but their hotel and its adjoining golf course have something else going on. We sort of don't want to spoil it. In fact, it seems like much of the joy of this game comes from stumbling upon interesting elements of world building that the team has been working on, and toying with the increased array of clothing to be discovered on your journey.
So there's this town, Helvetia, that's in the absolute middle of nowhere.
Right.
And it's a Swiss-German village, and they love making cheese, but they also have this festival where they build these papier-mâché masks. And so we built 10 of them.
Right.
There's all different kinds, and like the owl one in particular is pretty popular. And there's like crazy jesters and skulls, but they're all kind of like handmade looking. Those are a big hit when it comes to photo mode.
What is my favorite area in the game right now? I have to say Charleston is. It's where the first responders are. So it's like an old fire department where you can like find firemen's uniforms and that kind of stuff. And there's a terminal where you can take the training course. And it's like, what do you do when you're seeing gas come in for the vents? And do you put your arm over your nose? Do you run out screaming, or do you light a match? That kind of stuff's great Fallout humor.
I'm playing the game and I come across this lighthouse in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, why the hell is there a lighthouse in the middle of nowhere? Like, oh, that's a real thing. That's in West Virginia. West Virginia has stuff like that.
We've learned how this game came together, and we've explored the world of West Virginia, so it's time to answer our next question. What exactly are you going to be doing in Fallout 76? There's been a lot of rumor over the past few weeks as to how much like a regular numbered Fallout game 76 really is, and it seems to be the question that the team has also been struggling with. How do you retain the elements of those games that work while doing something interesting? And how do you do something interesting without just cribbing off of other survival games? The version of 76 we look at today is the end result of months of playtesting and discussions, so before we dive into the specifics, let's start with the basics. Fallout 76 is online. You can play as a lone wanderer if you so choose, but there are no private maps or offline mode to speak of. There is a story and there are quests, but the focus of this game is on the player dictating what they want to do that day. Perhaps you want to discover a new part of the map, or find parts to craft a specific weapon. Maybe you want to kill a monster to get a high quality drop. Maybe you want to build a camp, claim one of the map's public workshops, or team up with others to take on events.
Super mutants are attacking, you know, Aunt Mabel's farm. So you'll go over and to protect from super mutants, and you don't know, like, will 10 other Yaoguais come running in at the same time because someone trained them in from across the mountain. There's public workshops where you can go in and claim them. You have to kill the monsters in there. There might be events spawning once you take them. Depends on the situation, the timing, and the area. And when you take them and you fortify them, you actually have access to resources that are super valuable for crafting. So you'll get access to you know, ore, some kind of ore, lead, and then lead's used for make bullets, and then you can make bullets, which in that game, any of these games is super helpful, right? So you take that for a reason. Then, like I said, you have your camp, which are mini workshops you can place almost anywhere. There's certain restrictions on that because we don't want you like the griefing outside the exit of the vault, but you can place them all over. They go, when you move servers, if that space is available, your camp will just be there. For some reason, again, this is a big game with a low number of people, it's overlapping and we can't place it there, it will be packed up and blueprinted, you can place it somewhere else, boom. And then the crafting is a huge part of the game because again, you're gonna wanna find very specific creatures or flora to combine for recipes. We are allowing crafting mods, crafting guns, crafting ammo, food, water, armor, power armor pieces, like the stuff that was there before and more.
Fallout 76 involves survival elements, but survival can so easily become a hindrance to fun. The work to find a balance between giving the player tasks they have to complete and not just overburdening them with chores has been a key focus over the past few months.
Here's an example I like to give. I have to brush my teeth every day or they'll rot and fall out of my head. I don't want to do that in a video game. I just don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is fun in the parts of survival and what is not fun in the parts of survival? So you have to eat and drink to stay alive. I heard a funny anecdote the other night. Someone was playing the game and they were starving and they wandered into a herd of cats. And they're like, I've never been happier to see a herd of cats because then I got to eat. It's sort of terrible, but. And then you can build a cooking stove, like most survival games, make the food more efficient. You know, we put diseases in. We have something called mutations. So Fallout 4, we had that inverse meter for your health and your rads. The more rads you had, the less your health was, and you're able to cure that. So in this game, the more rads you have, the more chances you get mutated. And they have all sorts of neat, like they're almost like traits from Fallout 1 and 2, where they have a plus and a minus. You can cure them if you don't like them, or there's ways to permanently get them if there's ones you really like. Way late game stuff, but yeah, you'll get these mutations, and they're mostly gameplay. They're not. Some of them are visual, but they're mostly gameplay side stuff that like tweak your character a little.
Fallout 76 also involves crafting elements. Another balancing act was making sure that this stuff was compelling and not just a chore.
Are you going to get the perk cards that allow you to craft more things and more efficiently? And we added from Fallout 3, we added back in items degrade now, food rots, so you're never quite comfortable. But as you progress in power, you can decide, like, I'm going to focus on cooking. And then you might want to vent, you can sell these things to other people in the game. So you're like, I make the best ribeye steak in the game. It'll overfill you and give you a health bonus. And here you go, 40 caps, you know.
Each time you level up in Fallout 76, you get to pick a new perk card. There's a limited amount you can have active at one time, meaning that if you want to re-roll your character's perks, you simply swap out your perk cards. You can also share perk cards within a party, meaning that teams of players can specialize to work together more efficiently.
Tool their characters such that they are better at survival elements of the game. Then you might be combat-y, other person might be more for a medic, one person might be more, workshop like defenses and repair. So you decide you want to focus in on crafting. You have to find the recipes in the world. You get recipes all sorts of places, quests and random drops and loot. And so there's a lot. Like compared to Fallout 4, there are orders of magnitude more. And so you'll find the ones that are most efficient. A lot of them have pluses and minuses. I think that's more fun. It allows a player to make decisions. So one might make you more like susceptible to disease, but give you a huge health buff. Anyway, you'll be able to focus on that. Either trade them with your friends. We're exploring the possibility of allowing you to set up a robot vendor in a hub area. So you have a robot vendor and that's your vendor, and you go up and again, we're exploring things. But again, live game, long term, there's also the possibilities are endless.
There are a lot of systems working in Fallout 76, and BGS's hope is that by introducing all these ways to play, they have a game world that is capable of creating emergent moments. They have to do some work to make sure it's not total chaos, for instance, giving wanted levels to aggressive players, and having it so that the death penalty is as light as making you respawn at a nearby location. The game allows for several types of player communication, everything from voice chat to an emote wheel, and even a photo mode that came out of one of the studio's game jams. But according to Todd, the design of this multiplayer Fallout is an exercise in not just knowing when to control the player, but crucially, when not to.
Once we were really playing together and saw that collision of people and systems, that's where you say like, oh, this is still Fallout. Like if you sit down and play it, it feels like Fallout, but its loop and mood are very different. Right. The other players are a system that we don't control in a great way. Let's not shy away from it. Let's kind of solve it. Let them collide. And where there's extra bad griefing or systems, we have a number of levers in place. But that for me is where a lot of the drama is. Like, let's let them all collide. And it'll be messy for a little bit, but we can solve it. I'd rather do that than like play it safe. It's like boring. You can sit though in any design meeting and come up with like a list of reasons not to do something.
Right.
It's pretty easy. Like, well, I'm worried about this, and I'm worried about this, and I'm worried about this, and I'm like, I'm worried it's gonna be boring. Like, let's at least try it. Like this is what we do. Like, you know, let's at least like, if this is a vibe we want, let's go at it.
One of the elements the team struggled with was figuring out how many players should be able to play together at once. It's a decision that involved both engineering and game design. On one hand, you have to look at the servers and see how many players they can support and keep that same level of fidelity we're used to in games like Fallout 4. And on the other hand, the game designers want to know how often players should run into each other to try and keep that moment special.
So yeah, that's been a challenge. It's like, how do we keep the feel of these games, like where it's a world where you can interact with everything, and cause that's part of the appeal of a Skyrim, right? It's like you see a jar on a table, you can pick up and mess with the jar, you can knock it off, and you can do whatever you want. Get AI to do crazy things. Yeah, it's a continual balancing act. That's part of the art, right? It's like, you know, do you cut content or do you do more technical work to try to make the content work? And it's like it's a call.
We had some very grand plans for this game, which I think, you know, once we talk about more later, will actually come to fruition. But the game we're very proud of right now that we're going to ship is about 24 people on the server, 24 to 32. One of the things that Todd pushed for the whole time, which we were all scared about a little, was you're going to open up the paper map and see this huge area, and you're going to see where these other people are, for good or ill. Right, so it's, do you want to go help them? Do you see them, they're doing this huge event that you can join in and get the big reward? Do you want to try to shoot them? However, that our PvP system ends up working out. You know, do you want to trade with them? They will become friends that you follow across all the servers. So all the servers are, you know, 24-person instance. You load in, you go in, it'll be full of people. You'll be able to play with them, quest with them, or ignore them. Have your teams and buddies. Like if you're my buddy, and you load in the game, I can just jump and immediately join you in your world, and it's seamless. Like it basically a load screen, you're in. We wanted to make it fun for a single player, right? We wanted to make it fun for teams. Our team limit right now is 4. It's all adjustable, but our team limit right now is 4. So we wanted to make it fun for co-op 4-person level gameplay, and we wanted to make it fun for bigger, like 12-on-12 death matches, right? And we're trying to, like we normally do, we're trying to jam it all in and hope it all works out.
Fallout 76 is a live game, meaning that, like games like Destiny or Warframe, eventually players are going to reach the point where they've done most of what there is to do. The studio has been working on a team deathmatch mode, which should help, but one of the challenges they've had was to introduce an endgame that was hard enough to challenge high-level players, while also somewhat repeatable. What they landed on was a cyclical nuclear war. The map of 76 has a number of nuclear bunkers. Teams of players will have to work together not only to find the nuclear codes, but to solve puzzles to reveal them, and to push the button to launch the nukes.
The end goal in this game is it's a cyclical story with the nukes. These huge winged bat-like creatures crawl up out of the world called scorch beasts. You're supposed to find the nuke codes to kill them, to seal their fissures. That also again irradiates the world. It'll put a big, the nuclear weather there, and all the flora and fauna will then change to be higher level and have rarer drops. rare crafting materials in certain sought-after, basically items and materials. Legendary. Going back to the legendary system, we added more tiers to the legendary system for weapons and armor. So you'll find those things there, and then that area will fade down over a certain period of time, and players will have to find the nukes again. And depending on where you nuke, different things will appear because there'll be different flora and fauna there.
How are they deciding? Are they working together against the world, or are they working together against themselves? And then what happens when you get a group of people that want to work against other players versus a group of players who want to work against the world, and then they get nukes? Do they create an online Cold War? Do they all decide to just blow up everything? So I think the nuke part is probably the one I'm most interested in seeing what they do. And we're trying to make it fun where it's fun to just launch them. Because it's very hard to all right, you have the codes to a nuclear missile. You're like, you know what, I don't want to launch it. If you can sort of incentivize them to, hey, it's going to be really fun to launch it where people aren't, and make that part of the world this high-level zone. So that kind of design I like a lot. Okay, it's going to be a high-level zone. You're going to roll in your power armor. You're going to make this really hard level for yourself. I'm really interested in what people do there.
The teams in Austin and Maryland are being supported by a third studio in Montreal. This studio, responsible for the mobile success story of Fallout Shelter, is also working on their next mobile title, Blades. We'll have a fascinating documentary on the development of Shelter and Blades in the coming weeks. Montreal has also been helping with the development of 76, but once the game is released, much of Maryland and Montreal will move onto Starfield. Maryland will continue to be in charge of the creative direction of 76, but the majority of live game support will be done in Austin. Fallout 76 is a full-priced game, but the team is planning to support the game with free updates for years to come. The game will feature microtransactions, but Bethesda told us that these will only come in the form of cosmetics. Bethesda said that this is a crucial element of allowing them to support dedicated servers and keep DLC free, and that any purchasable cosmetics available will also be available to earn through gameplay. Chris, who's worked on supporting online games since Ultima Online, gave us some insight into how they're planning to support Fallout 76 post-launch.
The plans are still coming together, but we do have a plan. So the plan is to have part of the team sort of support the game, roll out as much content updates as possible to keep the game fresh. I think if you've been around live games, you know that they live or die by how fast you can get updates out. So we need to be able to push decent updates out at a regular rate. At the same time, have some of the team working on big content beats, right? So we want to have some people working on something a little bit larger for people to consume, and have those sort of hit at longer intervals. So if you can sort of imagine it, you have one long beat, which is the larger content updates that are hitting, and then in between that are lots of little beats, which are the frequent updates that we're trying to push out. Whether that just be like new events or just new free items that we give away, we'll just try to keep the game fresh. That's the plan, right? So I guess what's that military adage is like, yeah, every plan is great until the first shot's fired.
Right.
So I imagine we'll have to be doing a lot of adjustments to the plan as soon as it goes live. So I think part of that is you can plan out all the content you want, but then once players start playing the game and you can observe how they play the game, what they like and what they don't like, you need to change the plan based on that stuff. You need to give the players something that they're passionate about. As a designer, you might think that this feature you put into the game is really, really cool and nobody plays it. Well, you probably shouldn't double down on the thing that nobody plays. You should probably double down on the features that the people actually play. So we might have to change our plans based upon how we see players working with the game when they play it.
If there's anything we've learned about the evolution of games over the past few years, it's that the success of Fallout 76 will depend as much on the game they have built as how they support it going forward. And so to do so, this plucky little studio of 130 or so people who made Fallout 4 is going to have to scale up. In our previous documentary, we showed how the development of Morrowind was the inflection point for the studio, the moment they begin to figure out their process, a process they would develop and hone over the next 4 games. And in many ways, this moment now also feels like a turning point. With the teams in Austin and Montreal, Bethesda Game Studios in Rockville, Maryland finally have the people power to work on multiple projects at once, while members of the team who have been with the company for years are starting to take ownership of projects themselves. Perhaps this means that the days of skipping between franchises are finally behind them, or maybe it means that they can be more daring in the games they develop. As work on Fallout 76 has been progressing, so too has it been on Starfield. From what we gathered during our time at the studio, Starfield sounds like a monumental undertaking. A game Todd has wanted to make for a long time, perhaps a game they would have made had they not successfully acquired the Fallout franchise. Perhaps now he feels like the team finally has the resources to pull it off. In any case, it's not the only project they're working on. Pre-production on The Elder Scrolls 6 has also started. Not the only thing that's getting announced at E3. You guys are coming out swinging with a bunch of stuff coming out for the future as well. Will it be weird to say the word Starfield in front of people?
What'd you just say? You gotta watch that, man. Someone will hear you. Just even hear you say it is weird. Right. We've been working on it for. That's another one that's had a long go. I think the trademark got registered in 2013, which is what most people have glommed onto.
Right.
So all of the internet rumors, we've never said a word. They just take that nugget and their mind goes to the right places. You know, the internet's smart. Our fans are really smart. And so you feel like it's good to acknowledge it. They're all saying it like, yes, right. That is what we're doing. But as far as announcing Starfield, very excited to do it. A little bit nervous, you know, because it is so new and it will have so many questions that we're not answering intentionally. So that's kind of new for us. At the same time, we feel that, you know, that's the time to do it. So, right, like, it's good to have that dialogue with your fans and say, we're doing this, and then we're doing this, because we know that they want them as much as we do. The things take time. But I think it's good to give everybody a little bit of a roadmap. And so you feel like it's good to acknowledge it. They're all saying it like, yes, that is what we're doing. But that's another thing where not just, hey, we should announce it, but how much thought we've given it for a long time. So on that original list, you know, Fallout, the biggest, most epic science fiction thing you could possibly imagine. And that's something we've talked about for a long time and kind of picked away at. And now we feel we're kind of, what's the right way to say it without spoiling anything? We are uniquely positioned to pull this game off.
Expectation management is important as well, right? Like not saying too much is as important as not.
That's the one that worries me, is that are we creating anxiety, or like people have so many questions that we'll be like, you know, whereas before they'll be like, we don't know what you're making. It's a little bit easier to go, yeah, you don't. Now you say, hey, you're making Starfield and you're making Elder Scrolls 6. Tell us all about them. You're like, I am not going to. There'll be a time for that. But both of those, you know, particularly Starfield, that's another way we talk about tone, is we just want to say the name, like being able to say, this is the tone. Just to, you know, this is what it feels a little bit like. Same with Elder Scrolls 6. But we have a little bit of a roadmap in our head, like this is the one that, like, as a base technology that this one adds. And they don't all, you know, the ones we're doing they're very, very different. So, you know, Starfield is definitely a big single player game. And 76 is not. So there's different techniques. It's a very different style game there'll be a time for that, but it's not, it does a lot of things very different than we've done before as well.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the past, present and future of Bethesda Game Studios. But we're not done yet. During our time embedded at BGS, we recorded over a dozen interviews. So if you want to watch a bunch of shorter docs on games in the Elder Scrolls and Fallout franchise, make sure you hit that subscribe button. See you then.